Thank you, Jim. We will follow a pretty open format, but we will begin. Each candidate will have an opportunity to give a 2-minute opening statement, and then each question, each candidate will have an opportunity to answer that for 3 minutes. We have flipped a coin to see who gets to go first and last, have the first word and the last word in terms of the opening and closing statements. There's also a 2-minute closing statement, and then we will just alternate with the questions. As Jim said, the county commission candidates will be up first in the one contested commission race. We have Chad Stewart and Arthene Bressler. Is that the right way to say that, Ms. Bressler? And then there is one uncontested county commission race where commission chairperson Becky Hood is running for re-election, and she could not be with us tonight. But also for the Board of Education, there's an uncontested race, and Mr. Charlie Walraven is here with us, and we would like to recognize Charlie and thank him for his service and his willingness to take on another term on the Gordon County Board of Education. We're not, we don't have a gong or a trap door or anything like that if you go overtime, but you go overtime at your own risk. Certainly we will let you, when Mr. Bowen's alarm goes off, we will certainly let you finish your thought. You don't have to stop in mid-word or thought or sentence. So we thank all the candidates for being here tonight, but most importantly, we thank all of you for being here tonight. We are also streaming live, I think, on the YouTube channel for the City of Calhoun, and so we thank them for that opportunity, and we look forward to getting into this. Our county commission candidates are in place, and according to the coin toss, Mr. Chad Stewart will go first. So if you'll give us your introduction, Mr. Stewart.
All right. Well, thank the Chamber for inviting us all here to speak this evening. Since I'm starting this thing off, I thought I would thank them. My name is Chad Stewart, and I serve you, the citizens of Gordon County, as one of your county commissioners. I attended the Gordon County school system growing up. I graduated from Gordon Central High School. I am married to the former Michelle Blackstock. We've been married for 18 years. I have 2 wonderful boys, Cade, who attends Gordon Central High School, and Layton, who attends Talbert Elementary. We live in the Sugar Valley area, and we're all members of South Calhoun Baptist Church that is on the corner of River and Pine Street. I am an ACCG certified county commissioner. I have 8 years of local county school board experience. I am a Calhoun-Gordon County leadership graduate. I am a graduate of the Georgia Academy of Economics. I have 7+ years of county commissioner experience, college degree. I have 5 years of experience on the Chamber's Development Authority Board. I am on the board of directors with the College and Career Academy, and I've just received my specialty certification in county revenue and finance from ACCG. When elected, I plan to keep the verbal commitment that we have made to business and industry to increase our Freeport exemption up to 100%, keep our employees' health care down to a minimum, complete SPLOST projects in a physically conservative manner, and make business-minded decisions that will benefit every citizen in Gordon County. Again, my name is Chad Stewart, and I'm seeking re-election to the Gordon County Board of Commissioners. I would appreciate your vote and support. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Ms. Bressler, you have 2 minutes to give your opening.
I'd also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for inviting us all here tonight. I think that's critically important that people get to listen to us. My husband Glenn and I have only been here 6 years. Yes, we're the newbies on the block. And we were born in traditional families. So as young children, we began learning about God, country, the flag, the pledge, all the basic American things, and have been staying with that theory all of our lives. We have no intention of ever changing the fact that we're totally dedicated to our country and our citizens, no matter what level they're on. We have 5 children, and now we have 5 grandchildren. They live in 2 states, Texas and Pennsylvania. Some grandparents say you're lucky not to be involved in this mess every day. I'm inclined to believe with them. I love all you dogs, but my alma mater is University of Florida, so I'm a Gator, but that's okay. I spent years in the field of psychology, working in all different levels, the happy ones and the sad ones. I also have a degree in English. In those years, I learned quickly that we are more same than we are different, but I also know that there are hidden abilities in people that don't always come out until they're under a lot of stress or duress or anxiety and things like that. Currently, my husband and I are members of the American Red Cross, who just celebrated 100 years of service right here in Northwest Georgia. American Legion Post 47, again, celebrated 100 years this year on March 10th in this area, and also members of St. Clement's Catholic Church, and he is an officer in the local Knights of Columbus, which is a worldwide organization of charity, 2 million plus and growing. We believe in exercising the basics, and we believe in Gordon County.
You can
Did I
finish
run
your
over?
sentence.
I'm sorry?
You can finish your statement or sentence.
So I've never been a commissioner. I've never even been a candidate for a public office. This is all new to me. But I also have all of you, have the entire county in my heart and in my thoughts actually every day with all that we're involved in on different levels. And I would do my best to carry on all the traditions and maybe come up with some new ideas as to what we can do to improve this county and make it even better than it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bressler. Ms. Bressler, we'll start with you with the first question, and both of you will have an opportunity to answer this question. What sort of ideas do you have for improving the infrastructure of Gordon County in a way that would attract business prospects to Gordon County?
I think we need to have more green businesses, more that really wouldn't have too much of an environmental impact other than being a clean business. I think we need to pay attention of some of our roadways, which are falling in disrepair quickly. We are short on housing everywhere. We'd have to have more housing available to have more people move in the community. I strongly stand behind having more opportunities to have employment right here in our own county, because too many people that live here have to drive other counties to make a decent living to support themselves and their families.
Thank you, Ms. Bressler. Mr. Stewart, same question. Do I need to read the question again?
No, that's okay. We have multiple items that we as a board collectively decided to put on the SPLOST. We use our SPLOST to help pay with the paving of the roads, and we spread that out over a period of 6 years' time. But we put probably around 12 million more this year in SPLOST for road repairs, Boone Ford being one of them, Salem Bridge, which will help some of the city's concerns they have with their business and industry. Infrastructure is very important. We've had some help from our friends at the state with the bypass that will help take some of the traffic off of our Highway 53, which is very congested, that most of you know. The Union Grove exit, we have more exits than most counties off of I-75, which will be very incremental when we get to the point when our Freeport hits 100% and business and industry start lining up down Union Grove exit. Infrastructure is always important. We're going to have growth, and there's going to be more growth. It's hard sometimes to keep up with the growth, but we've, I think, got a pretty good plan laid ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Yeah, I think that Union Grove interchange was first proposed when I was in high school, and we got it when I was a member of the chamber board. So,
Finally,
yeah,
yes.
It only took us 30 years, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows.
All right. You know, one of the most important things one of the most basic things that any governmental entity does is spend money. And I'd like to know each of your positions concerning spending by Gordon County as our local government. If you think spending is too high, what specific areas would you like to see cut and reduced? If you think it's too low, what areas do you think should be increased? And if you believe spending is too high, what would you do with any money that is a surplus that's created by those cuts? And also, if you believe spending is too low, how would you suggest the county raise revenue to cover the increase? Mr. Stewart, if you'll go first.
All right. I would say that our spending in Gordon County, and me being on the board, I guess you probably typically think I would say this was, I mean, we're right on the mark, I believe. We've took the rollback rate the last 2 years in a row, so which means that when you take that rollback rate, when the properties get assessed, they get a higher value, so we're going to bring more income in. Well, we take the rollback rate, which means that we're operating on the same amount of money that we did the year previous, and we've done that 2 years in a row. So I feel confident that we're making the right decisions and, you know, being financially conservative in our movements on the county. Now, I will say that we've been able to give our employees raises the last 2 years, plus take the rollback rates. So I believe we're doing a very good job in watching the citizens' monies as it comes to their taxes. And that's what everybody wants. Nobody wants their millage rate increased. And you have to provide services. You have to provide fire. You have to provide police protection. So, and our county keeps growing and growing. The population keeps growing, and we're still trying to provide the same amount of services for more citizens with the same budget, which is a difficult task. But one of the strategic moves that we used as a county was, I guess maybe a year and a half ago, we refinanced the county's debt. And by refinancing our county's debt at a lower interest rate, we saved over $500,000. So making strategic moves like this is ways where we can save money. We renegotiated contracts. That we've renegotiated 2 different contracts, which saved the county money. So there's ways to save money if you're creative, where you can keep your millage rate the same and still provide services.
Ms. Bressler?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not a certified commissioner. I haven't had that class. But I do know a little bit about budgets. I think the commission has done a really good job with what they've had to work with. One of my big favorite things is SPLOST, because that goes for additional spending that a lot of citizens don't even think about in the county. Small little things that build up over a period of time and cost enormous amounts of money. As far as employees, yes, I agree with that too. But when it comes to no rollback, I think I would do it a little differently. Because I honestly don't see how we can keep up with the prices of everything going up constantly and still not have some raise in taxes somewhere to cover those additional expenses. So to roll it back is one thing, but to maybe put it in a different type of sinking fund or whatever to use somewhere in the future to come up with ideas that we may not have even thought of by now. I know we've got our planning project going on, which looks good, but this, as far as the money goes, I don't see how long you can hold back on raising taxes, even if it's a small amount of money at a time, to use in the future, if nothing else.
Thank you. All right, this next question will start with you, Ms. Bressler. Currently, one of the issues before the County Commission over the last several years has been the Freeport tax exemption for inventory tax. Currently, the Freeport tax exemption is at 80% is exempt from inventory taxes. How do you think that the Commission should proceed with that rate? Should they increase the amount of exemption, thereby lessening the amount of the tax? Should they decrease the amount of the exemption, which would increase the amount of the tax? Or should they leave it the same, and why?
that's done on an annual basis, probably good for the now to keep it the same as it is right now. What my main concern about is in the near future and the impact that will eventually reach Georgia that's going on in Washington at the moment. I see that we're going to have, if things continue, our prices are going to jump on just about everything, including our foods. So import, probably keep the same for now. We have too many unknowns to really state definitely what to do. It's one of those things I think should be adjusted as the economy needs.
Okay. Mr. Stewart?
All right. Well, as I don't know if everyone knows what Freeport is, but Freeport is an exemption on the inventory that you have at your actual businesses and industries. And there's 3 different categories. There's finished goods, and there's raw goods, and I think there's finished goods for shipping. When we first started out with increasing the Freeport percentages, we had an outcry from the business and industry that said, if you can't increase the Freeport percentage, we're going to have to leave. They said, we need some sort of commitment from you, the county, and the city council. We need some sort of verbal commitment that says, if you increase this, we'll stay. Well, when we first started, we had one level that was at 40%, 2 of the other levels were at 20%. We moved up to 40%. And the city also moved up with us. We've got a very good relationship with the city, and we work hand in hand with this Freeport issue that we were dealing with. Now, when we did make that first increase in the paper, they put out that we retained 300 jobs at Shaw, and they were going to increase another 60 jobs. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and I've found this out with being on the Development Authority for so long, there's a map that has all of the counties in all the state of Georgia. They're different colors. Well, those different colors represent the amount of Freeport exemption on inventory that we have. Well, Gordon County was a different color than Floyd, Bartow, Whitfield. They were all at 100%. So every time an existing business or industry comes to look at Gordon County, or if an existing industry thinks about expanding, that's more taxes they're going to have to pay. If they can go 15 miles north, 15 to the west, 15 to the south, and they can save hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're going to do that. So what we've done as a county commission and a city council, we made a promise to business and industry that we would increase the Freeport percentages by 20%, and that's how you can only increase them by 20% increments. You could do 20, 40, 60, however you want to do it, but they have to be done in 20% increments. Now, we've been increasing every other year. The businesses that we're going to leave are now staying. So that is a tax base that we're holding on to. Yes, it does cost the county. It does cost the county school system. We work very well with Susan Remillard. We have her in all of our financial meetings because when we increase those Freeport percentages, it actually affects the county school system also. So we've done this together collectively with the county schools, the city council, increasing those Freeport percentages to keep business and industry here. So now when we hit that 100%, that's when we're actually going to be able to compete, and we're going to be able to compete with all the counties around us, and we're really going to see a large amount of growth here in Gordon County when we hit that percentage.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. To kind of follow up that question, and you will be the first one on this question. You know, Freeport is one of different bundles of incentives that local government can do to try to attract business to Gordon County, and certainly that's what we at the Chamber are all about. What sort of incentives do you believe are appropriate for our local governments to give to prospective businesses to relocate here? And would you support the giving of free land to prospective industrial prospects?
To start out with the last part of your question, free land, it would have to be a worthwhile endeavor, a large enough business, I think. But I think free land would have to be something that we would have had to already look at in maybe with a SPLOST or with economic development, because it's hard to buy large tracts of land and give those away. So that would have to be something that would be put into a SPLOST for economic development, where we could have the land that was paid off or debt-free before we could offer that type of incentive. Now, we already have a tier system on the development board that I sat on with Jim. We have a tier system that basically lays out the amount of jobs, the amount of the investment, if it's how much investment there's going to be in the land, in the equipment, and those are set up on a tier system. So depending on what sort of investment they're going to bring to the table, it depends on what sort of abatements and different tax incentives that we can give them. And you want to be careful with increasing your incentives because you have existing industry here, and you don't want to step on the toes of some of our existing industry here. And I will tell you that most of the increase in jobs or the increase in industry or the expansion in industry, 80% of it is your existing industry that does the expansions. We've just been informed that LG is going to have another $50 million expansion. So the existing industry, you have to be careful with what sort of incentives that you want to throw out there for, you know, business and industry that may be looking to come in your community, because you want to take care of your existing industries also at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Ms. Bressler?
I would not be in favor of giving them any debt-free land at all, because I think that would be needed in whatever fashion. I just don't agree with that on any level. As far as the tier system, I have to agree. You have to watch what you offer to who so that you don't step on the toes of the existing ones, because you want your long-term businesses here. But again, depending on what they have to offer, it would depend on what I think the county would offer back to them, counteroffer.
Thank you. This will be the last question, and you'll have first chance at it, Ms. Bressler. In the past, the Gordon County government has set aside money in its budget to help fund the salary and expenses of a dedicated strategic economic planner. Do you believe that Gordon County needs such a position, and would you support the inclusion of such funding in future county budgets?
Now, is that the same thing as a comprehensive plan? Is that what that is, or is this?
It's a specific employee to do economic development and planning. A person.
You're asking if I would agree with having somebody do that?
Yes. And funding it through the county budget.
Well, I have to agree, it's a lot of work to work on that all the time, because things keep changing and laws keep changing and requirements keep changing. I think that would probably be a good idea, to have somebody dedicated to that full time. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Stewart?
Economic development, as you all know, that times have changed. Before, in the past, you would wait for business and industry to come knock on your door. Those times aren't here anymore. Now you go out and you try to acquire those business and industries and attract business and industry to come in. You have to be able to compete with the other counties that are around you. And I know some of the other counties, I won't name any of them, but I know some of the other counties even go overseas. They send people overseas to attract new business and industry to come into their counties. So if you weren't, if you're going to put forth, let's say, a certain amount of money, it's going to be a small amount of money compared to if that person can produce. It's a small price to pay to bring business and industry in, more diversified business and industry in, because that's what we all want here. We want someplace, well, I know I do, and I think a lot of you, the rest of you out here feel the same way that I do. I want a county that I live in that when my boys graduate high school, they go off and get college degrees, that if they want to come back here and be employed in Gordon County, there's an opportunity for them to come back and find employment here, and good employment that's a good paying job. So yes, I mean, economic development is very, very important for us to be able to compete with surrounding counties and all the other counties in Georgia and other states.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. That concludes our questions. Mr. Stewart, you'll have 2 minutes for your closing statement, and then upon his completion, if you'll go with your closing statement, Ms. Bressler.
Well, again, my name is Chad Stewart, and I thank each and every one of you that have given me the opportunity to serve you for the past 7+ years. I believe that I've tried to be very fiscally conservative with your money, make good decisions, make good business smart decisions. We run our county I believe as a business now, we're very professional. We're in and out of our meetings, usually in a quick fashion, because we come in, we take care of business, and then, you know, there's no fighting, there's no fussing, there's no bickering. Now, we will sit down and hash things out, but when a vote is given, we all agree on it, we stand behind it. I would hope that I could have your vote and your support to serve you for another 4 years, and I just thank you again for the opportunity that Gordon County has given me.
Ms. Bressler.
I also thank all of you for being here tonight. I think it's critically important that you pay attention to what's going on, because so many people don't in the county. I think we have a good commission right now. I think they've done a lot of hard work. I think they've accomplished many things. But I also think it's time to get some fresh voice into what's going on. And that's what I would like to do. I have some different ideas. I have a few disagreements with what's going on. There are many topics that have not been discussed tonight. But I think we get to a point where it's time to transfer the ability or the opportunity to other people with new ideas. Some of these people have been in office a very long time, and I think it's time to get some new ideas and some new things in motion.
Thank you, Ms. Bressler. Mr. Stewart, let's thank our county commission candidate. We have the gang of six in place. So we will actually go post by post. There will be some overlap in the questions, and then there may be some that get asked and not of others, but because they do want to get us out of here in time to get home and see Jeopardy, I think. So we'll begin with the candidates for County Board of Education Post 3. Dana Stewart is the incumbent, and Alan Dutch is the candidate that is the challenger. And if we could, by flip a coin, Ms. Stewart will have the first opening statement.
Thank you all for coming out, and my name is Dana Stewart, and I'm currently serve on the Gordon County School Board in the Post 3 position. I'm a nurse practitioner here in Gordon County, and I'm very active in our medical community, our church, our schools, and our community as a whole. My husband Will and I and our 2 sons, we live in the Redbud community. I believe there are things that uniquely qualify me to serve our schools. I've served time on the school board, and there is a distinct learning curve that I did not anticipate prior to my service. I have experience with budget building and accreditation process through time I spent as a manager of a diabetes center. I believe my medical experience uniquely qualifies me to assist with our child advocacy program. I stand firm with my Christian faith, and in an uncertain world, I feel that Gordon County still appreciates this. Finally, I love this community and I love its children. I believe every patient that I see deserves high-quality medical care, and I believe that every child in Gordon County deserves a quality education. My platform is simple: School security is incredibly important. I believe work in this area is paramount to success, and we all know that children need a clean and safe work environment in order to excel. We must ensure one of our belief statements, each child has an advocate. This is paramount to success and security, the last of which has been confirmed in a Secret Service study. Finally, straight from the state education website, the role of the board is to guarantee the integrity of major management systems and processes, and then reviewing their results. I want to ensure we continue successful programs, and I feel we have a lot of successful programs based on our results. And I want to encourage research and development of new programs when results show that we fall short. It's for these reasons that I ask for your support in the post-3 election.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Mr. Dutch?
Thank you to the chamber and everyone who's here this evening. Well, actually, first of all, I wanted to tell everybody I was at the, I went and voted the other day, and a young lady beside me said that she had seen in the paper that there was a Democrat running, and she wanted to make sure that was not a misprint. I did not tell her. I told her there was actually two. I did not tell her I was one of them because I'm unsure about the campaigning rules about that. But yes, this rare bird is back in Gordon County. I'd like to introduce myself just a little bit. I've been a resident of Gordon County since 2001. My daughter Elizabeth and my foster daughter Taylor have both attended Gordon County schools from kindergarten through high school. Myself, I'm a assistant professor of communication at Georgia Highlands College, and since my wife and I arrived in Gordon County, we've been active members of St. Timothy's Episcopal Church. I've served as their co-youth leader with my wife, and also as a vestry member. For y'all that are of the my Baptist and Methodist brethren, that is similar to a pastor parish. And I've also been a past board member and volunteer for Network Day Service Center for Northwest Georgia, which deals with mentally challenged students and adults. I've been an active parent volunteer at Red Bud Elementary, Sonorville Middle School, and Gordon Central High School for as long as we've had children in the system. I've worked in higher education as an instructor, as a student orientation advisor, faculty coordinator. I've also served on a fair number of committees, which I will let you know about in my close.
Thank you, Mr. Dutch. This first question will go to you, and then Ms. Stewart can follow. Obviously, in recent months and years, we have seen some horrible tragedies in our schools due to acts of violence. Are there any specific ideas that you have in relation to creating a more secure school system and school buildings and locations, and how would you propose funding those?
Now, the funding part is probably the most difficult, because that involves lots of different entities, including the state and maybe even some federal government and local. And for a school system our size, we have to be aware that as much security as we want to provide, and as much as we want to be able to provide those safe environments, we really have to be able to find that money or find that funding to be able to do those things. One of the things that I see as very important that I think is missing in a lot of schools that are throughout the state or throughout the United States is we're putting a big emphasis on reacting to security situations where students are presenting a danger with weapons or things like that. But as I look around our school system and other school systems, we're progressively decreasing the number of counselors and people of that nature that could actually help us identify these students ahead of time and identify these threats before they ever become a problem. So I think as much emphasis as we should, and I know we do need to spend a lot of time working with local law enforcement and emergency management and organizations like that, I think we need to kind of reassess how we're looking at these students before they ever become a security threat.
Thank you, Mr. Dutch. Ms. Stewart?
Well, the funding would be something that we would have to look at, both through the state and because the funding that comes to the schools is pretty well set when it comes in. So I definitely think that's something that we would need to look at. But school security is a major part of my platform as well as child advocacy. And I believe that it would be necessary for us to work with our community through volunteers, through our sheriff's office, and just getting a good security system in place. But I feel like with school security, we have to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is one of our mission statements is making sure every child has an advocate, making sure every child has someone that they can go to if they feel they're being bullied or if they feel like they're sad or they're depressed. If you look back at some of the recent school shootings and you look at the interviews after those school shootings, most of the time somebody says, well, we saw this coming. We saw something on social media. We saw a text message. We knew he had been bullied, or we knew he or she had depression. And I think a lot of people are afraid to tell someone when they feel that way because we've been so ingrained not to tattle on people. And so I think that our school, I know we have in our middle and high school, we have Sources of Strength, which is not an extracurricular activity, but just kind of a resource there for our children, and they have adults that they can go and talk with if they feel like something like that is happening. So I think we have to get to the root of the problem. We have to make sure that we are listening to our children to prevent these things from happening, and I feel like we need to make sure, and we've made strides in school security already with, putting in locks and doing different things like that, but I think it's working closely with our community volunteers, our sheriff's department, local emergency agencies, and then finding the funding as we get that process in place.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. You will begin this next question. We heard the county commission candidates talk about the Freeport exemption. And we heard the candidates talk about how the current county leadership has, along with the city leadership, has made a pledge to work towards achieving a 100% Freeport exemption. What, if any, impact do you believe that this would have on the Gordon County schools, and what efforts do you think should be taken to lessen that impact?
Well, I think with anything that we look at, whether it's budget or scores or whatever, there's a process to that and a metric, and I think we have to look to see what part of our funding is coming from the local community, and we have to make sure that if we're not seeing that happen, that we go back to the drawing table and we look. We definitely want to make sure that I'm a taxpayer as well, so we want to make sure that we are getting the appropriate tax to be able to fund our schools. I know we also apply for grants, and we just got notification that we have gotten a pretty significant grant that will actually help with some of the fundings of our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Mr. Dutch?
Well, I think that's a delicate balance that we have to, because there's the amount of money that the business will bring in, and if they bring in residents to the county, then that's going to help with property taxes, but I do think that needs to be a kind of process where the budget isn't impacted greatly, and maybe have some forecasting and see how, as this is rolled out, the Freeport tax is rolled out, how does it impact what the school budget is, and does it put us out of some things that we need to be doing or some things we're already doing? I know that from my experience, getting funding and getting grants is a great thing, but you have to have that basis of income from the county to keep doing the things you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Dutch. This next question will start with you and then go to Ms. Stewart. It's a little long, but hang with me, okay?
Do I need to take notes?
No, but it actually implicitly involves math, so
Uh-oh. Oh, that could be a problem.
be prepared. But we were discussing taxes, and the tried and true method of local taxation for the funding of schools is property taxes. Currently, the Gordon County schools have enrolled 62.2% of the public school students in Gordon County. The Calhoun City Schools, on the other hand, has 37.8% of the public school students in Gordon County. However, the Gordon County Board of Education's portion of the tax digest available for school taxation only represents 54.83% of the tax digest, whereas the Calhoun City Schools portion of the tax digest represents 45.17% of that same digest. Do you believe that this would make funding of the Gordon County schools more difficult? And if so, what steps do you believe should be taken to lower or change this disparity? And if not, then why not?
Well, I'd kind of have to see the factors other than the millage rate that go into the budget. And I think that in seeing those numbers, you can obviously say, well, that seems like a very, it seems like a very unfair situation where more of the taxes are going to the city schools based on population. But, the other factors that might have to do with that might have to do with grants and charter and our ability to gather money from other places as well. So I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I don't know that it has to work one-to-one in that we have to be accumulating the same amount of money in this setting to have things all being equal in throughout the county and the city.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart.
Well, I believe every child needs an education, and their parents are going to decide pretty much where they're going to go to school. And so it's not too off to one side or the other. So I feel like, as long as we're getting the necessary funding that we need for our budget in order to take care of our current students, then I feel like that we're doing a good job. I know our millage rate now is almost at the top of where we can go. So I think
That's why we asked the question.
Yeah, so I think it's just over 19, and I think 20 is the highest. So I feel like as long as when we look at our budget and we review our budget every year, we sit down and do a budget, and then we review it throughout to make sure we're within that budget. And as long as every child is getting the necessary resources to be the most successful child that they can be, then I feel like we're doing good.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. This will be the last question for the post 1 or the post 3 candidates, rather. There have been some articles of late in various newspapers around the state and in our local newspaper, and specifically in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution recently. There have been concerns raised about school systems, specifically charter systems, which Gordon County is a charter system, lowering professional standards for the hiring of faculty and administrators. Some school systems have specifically pledged not to lower their professional standards. What is your position on this issue, and do you believe that there are challenges to hiring educators in Gordon County, and if so, are professional standards one of those challenges? And Ms. Stewart, you'll go first with that.
So I feel like that when you're looking at hiring personnel, teachers, administrators, we have to look at the qualifications, but we also have to look at what type of background that they have. And I know that there's been some talk recently about lowering of quality of standards. I don't feel like in Gordon County we lowered our standards. I feel like there are people who have things behind their name and different titles that they have and different degrees, but they may not be the right fit for a certain position. And sometimes when you have all of these qualifications, you actually limit your pool of applicants that you can choose from. And so by taking some of those qualifications out and saying, okay, we're going to take these qualifications, and then if you get into this position, then you have so long to get these certain certifications. You basically broaden the pool of of the people that you can actually have apply for those certain positions. And I feel like as long as we are looking at personnel and we are putting the appropriate, best qualified people in those positions to take good care of our children, then I don't feel like at all that we have lowered standards. We go by the state policies on hiring, and so I feel like when we do those things that we do broaden, because yes, it can limit your applicant pool when you have a lot of qualifications that come with a certain position.
Mr. Dutch.
Well, I've been reading the paper a good bit, so. But and here's what I would respond to that. I think that having sat on a good number of hiring committees through the University of Georgia system, you have to be careful that there's not a perception from your faculty in your system that they're not going to get a fair viewing or a fair hearing. You may be strictly following the policies. You may be working with applicants, but I don't think you want to create an environment if this is, and like I said, I don't want to base any I don't want to cast any things based on what's been said in the newspaper, but I think that we have to be careful that if we have a set of qualifications, just like we do in the statewide job candidate searches, we need to make sure that there's not a perception that if you're qualified, you're going to be looked over, and somebody else could be put in that position, and then they can work towards getting to where the qualifications are supposed to be. There's a difference between following policy and making sure that the faculty, the teachers in the area, don't perceive that there's nowhere to go in Gordon County. Once you get to a certain point, you won't be moved anywhere else if you're not, if your qualifications won't move you towards advancing inside the county. We could have a leakage of good quality faculty and administrators that go to other systems if the perception is they won't ever be able to move forward here in our system.
Thank you, Mr. Dutch. That concludes the questions for the post 3 candidates. Ms. Stewart, if you'll begin your closing statement, and then as soon as she's finished, you can begin, Mr. Dutch.
Thank you.
The bottom line is that we need to do what's in the best interest of our children. Our community has great support for our schools. Thank you all for that. Our school system has the best administrators, teachers, and students I've ever seen. As a board, we owe it to our community, administrators, teachers, and students to give the resources to continue our success. I make that commitment. I will work to help make sure we do not get sidetracked. For this reason, again, I ask for your support for the post 3 election.
All right. Well, I told you I finished up a little bit of my, got too close there, a little bit of my background. As a faculty member with both Georgia Highlands and Shorter University, I've served on a good number of committees, which as a faculty member you are required to do, including assessment, evaluation, several SACS committees, which are no fun, but and also I've been involved in a lot of different areas that have to do with institutional effectiveness and assessment and making sure that the institution I'm part of is doing the best for its students and for its faculty. One of the things I'd like to leave you all with is one of the wonderful things I know and love about Gordon County schools. When we first moved to this area, we were warned by several people, oh, your children have to go to the city schools. And unfortunately, I think that's a perception that is there sometimes. But I have found in Gordon County so many students that are involved in so many professional and extracurricular activities whether it's sports or FBLA or FFA or, you know, like my daughter, fine arts, that we have some of the best teachers, best administrators, and frankly, given the students that we have that are very mixed in their socioeconomic background, we definitely have a great number of students who are excelling both academically. My daughter had her pick of colleges when she went to go apply to colleges, and that's in no part due to the fact that the quality of folks that we have in Gordon County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutch. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. We'll move on now to the post 5 candidates for County Board of Education. Ms. Nan Barnett is the incumbent, and we'll give her opening statement first, then followed by Mr. Casey Smith and his opening statement. Ms. Barnett.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Nan Barnett, and I have a wonderful husband named Billy. If you ever went to Walmart, the last 9 years he got to work, he was your greeter. He would have won the contest nationwide. Billy and I were blessed with 3 young boys. Our oldest son lives in Arkansas. Our middle son passed away in a car accident. Our youngest son lives in the metropolis of Sonoraville. When our son was killed, he had 4 children, so Billy and I became involved more than just being a grandparent, being very much a part of their life. I taught school in Gordon County for 34 years. I've lived here all of my life. In those years of teaching, I have seen how education has changed, but I'm so proud to be a part of it. When I was retiring, as I was getting ready to retire, talking with Rebecca Owen, who did United Way, when I was teaching, if a child needed something and there was no agencies in Gordon County to help me out, I always went to my church. And I got to where when people would meet me coming down the aisle, they would turn the other way because they knew I wanted money. But as I was getting ready to retire from teaching and working with Rebecca, I worked with United Way and developed a program called Community Information Referral Service. I did that for 10 years, and we found out there were still no agencies in Gordon County to serve those families. So I dwelt with the faith community those 10 years. When I retired from that, I had a group of people come to me wanting me to set up the same kind of program in the faith community, and I worked and did that in 2004. We started a program called Good Samaritan Ministries of Gordon County. I have an office in the Baptist Association office, and we serve all people of Gordon County because we have, in our schools, we have a lot of students that get free lunch. If they get free lunch, there's a socioeconomic issue there. We have, I could go on.
Well, you can come back at the end for sure. Mr. Smith.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. My name is Casey Smith, and I've lived in Gordon County my entire life. I'm married to Belinda, and we have a son, Casten. And Belinda's a teacher at Talbot Elementary School, and Casten attends first grade there as well. We also have a 2-year-old daughter who's not here, named Casely. And at Talbot, I also serve as the chairman of the governance committee there. And right now, I currently own and operate an insurance agency here in Calhoun. And before that, I served as a president of a professional arena football league, and I've worked as a general manager of some football teams. And I'm just very passionate about Gordon County and Gordon County schools, and want to offer my services to try to help and take it to a new level and a new direction. And we'd love to get back as much as we can. I donate a lot of my time. We volunteer a lot. We donate monetarily and to the schools, and we're just very passionate about the schools and want to do all we can do to help take it to a new level.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And we will begin with the first question to you, and it's fairly general, but what do you see as the role of a Board of Education member in the day-to-day governance of our schools?
So the role of a board member, I believe, would be just managing the school system as a whole, and that's one thing that if I am elected, I look forward to is working with our Board of Education that we have. We've had a lot of members that's been there for quite a while, and then also working with the superintendent. But looking at the budget, seeing where we can find any wasteful spending, looking at ways to be innovative, trying to keep going down the track of innovation. I think the Gordon County school system did a good job of that this year with the one-to-one initiative. And just overall, just looking at all aspects that we can look at to make our school system even better than it is.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Barnett?
Say it again.
Okay. What do you see as the role of a Board of Education member in the day-to-day governance of the schools?
Well, being in a community that's very active, we hear a lot of things that are going on in our schools. I think that the superintendent is appointed to be the person that is the umbrella of what's going on. As a board member, I like to be aware of what each school district, each school has its own personality. So we get to know that school system, that school particularly, through the activities and so forth. And as a board member, I think I want to be the encourager of what's going on there. I think the administration in our central office is doing a great job. So we are a support for them as well as the people in the community.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. You mentioned this question will start with you, and you mentioned the role of the superintendent and the interaction between the superintendent and the school board. What do you think would be the appropriate process if someone raised a question of whether or not the superintendent or anyone in the central office or the administration violated a specific board policy?
Well, we're aware of policies, and I think we have a chairman of the board. If they were truly identified as doing that, talk with the chairman of the board, and then we would, as a board, we would come together and we would discuss and find out the true details of the situation and go from there.
Okay. Same question to you, Mr. Smith.
Read the question more.
Yes. What do you think would be the appropriate process if an allegation was made that the superintendent or one of the other central office staff or even a school level administrator violated a specific board policy? What process should the school board take to deal with that allegation?
The school board would certainly have to get together and to work on that and to really pinpoint what the issue was and make sure that there's enough evidence there to line up with that. And then you got to look and see what the policies are, and you must be consistent. Must be consistent with the policies that we have in place, and then go forth with a due process. Then.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, the next question would start with you, and it was addressed with the previous candidates, but we all have watched in horror as these school tragedies have taken place as a result of violence in the last few years. And I think we all have sort of prayed and said, thank you, Lord, that hasn't been us. Is there a particular vision you have in mind for what would need to be done and implemented at the Gordon County school level to make our schools safer?
One thing I would like to do is work with our local sheriff's office, law enforcement, the emergency management, and also get stakeholder input, work with our governance committees in our schools, kind of see what they're seeing, what they're thinking. And I think you want to come across with a system-wide plan, but I think it's something that can't be one and done. It's not very cookie cutter. I think you need to revisit it, look over it as you go. One point of focus that I think that I've kind of seen could potentially be an issue is our schools when they're in renovation. There's a lot going on with schools during renovation, and we need to make sure we have plans with that. There's a lot of people in and out of them, but just really working with the local law enforcement and stakeholder input, and continuing the conversation and assessing it as we go and move forward.
Repeat it.
Ms. Barnett, no, that's fine. Obviously there have been some great school tragedies due to violence in the schools, some by adults, some by students. And is there anything that you have in mind, a vision that you have for things that would need to be changed or added, or do you think everything is appropriate as for security in the Gordon County schools right now?
We work continually to try to make sure that our schools are safe. Jima has worked and had walk-throughs with each school principal and pointed out specific things. Presently, we are in conversation with the first Homeland Security person in the state of Georgia. Terry Nesbitt is helping to develop, to find a resource person to specifically come to Gordon County and point out things, help us to get organized in an even better way than we are now, even continuing working with the Sheriff's Department. And I see every time I hear about a shooting in a school, as a teacher, I remember students that I could identify early on that had issues that were never addressed. And I think as we realize more and more that the mental health issue is a big issue, so we need resources even more in our schools that that child can be identified and particular kind of help. And one of the things that I do all the time is medicine for someone that is in a mental crisis. The cost is astronomical. And if people do not have the funds to get what they need, it continues to grow and grow and grow. So I think we have to, as just community people, people in the faith community, we have to realize and we say, I can help and I will do that.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. My big math tax question. But the point, let me pare this down.
All
actually
right,
a
you
little
do
bit
that.
for you. Clearly, in terms of percentages, the Gordon County Schools has basically 2/3 of the public school students that live in Gordon County, and the city has a little more than 1/3. Whereas when you talk about the tax digest, which is the amount or the value of property that then gets multiplied by the millage rate to generate tax bills, Gordon County's the Gordon County Board of Education's portion of that tax digest, while they have 2/3 of the students, is only around 55% of that tax digest, whereas the city has 1/3 of the students and has 45% of that tax digest. Do you find that that makes it difficult to generate revenue to pay for the bills of the county schools? And what ideas would you have to try to equal those numbers out?
I don't know how to get that equaled out. In my years of education, it's been going on that long. I do know that sometimes if the state would get to our county and other counties as well, the funds that we should be getting with the austerity cuts in Georgia, Gordon County has lost $30-something million. And with those monies, we could have been doing a lot of things in maybe a different kind of way. I think this is something that we have had going on for a long time, and we need to work. Maybe, I don't know who would be the person to say, you get a more direct portion of getting 1/3 and we get the other 2/3. But I think it's something that maybe we could work together and try to solve that issue.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. Mr. Smith?
There is something I've noticed over the past few years. There is a discrepancy there with that. And kind of like Miss Nan said, I don't know how you fix it. I guess we would have to rely on working with our county commissioners and come together as a board and try to find a solution for it. But I would like to find a solution for that, but I don't exactly know how to pinpoint and get that done, though.
A difficult question that, as Ms. Barnett says, has been evident here for a long, long time. Thank you. Also, your final question, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Smith, but it is a question also that was asked of the previous candidates. And I don't want you to think that I'm just asking in relation to just Calhoun and Gordon County. There have been articles that have appeared in the Atlanta Constitution, the Macon Telegraph, the Valdosta Journal, as well as our local paper, about charter systems and the lessening of professional standards for hiring. What is your position concerning those issues? Some school systems have specifically announced pledges that they will not lower their professional standards. And so I'd like to know what your position is on that, and are there challenges that the Gordon County Board of Education faces in hiring qualified educators to come to Gordon County?
I think we got plenty of qualified teachers for any position, so I wouldn't be in favor of lowering qualifications or standards. But I do say whatever you do, you must do it consistently. So whatever stance we take on that, whatever platform is, we need hiring consistency across the board. But personally, though, I don't believe that there's a reason that we would lower any standards or qualification for hiring.
Thank you. Ms. Barnett?
I remember that question. I taught school when we didn't have a charter system. I've been on the board since we've had one. There's a lot of difference. And our standards have not been lowered. A person can have a degree and not be a co-worker, cannot be actively a part of the day-to-day activities. So I think our standards have not been lowered, but when a principal or whomever is choosing a candidate to be a part of his or her team, we need to support that person. Now, they may not have the degree completed at that time, but give them a chance to get it completed, and the state does that. You have a period of time to do it. But I have never, I'll say this, I'd rather have a really good worker every day than maybe somebody that had a doctorate degree that didn't perform as well as that person.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. That's the last of your questions. Ms. Barnett, as you went first, Mr. Smith will have the last word. So if you would begin with your closing statement.
Well, I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the people of Gordon County being here all the time. I do know a lot of people, and they know me because I happen to be a part of some families that had a lot of siblings, and I just loved living here. I've seen how the schools have progressed, and I just am very proud of our schools and what students are getting to be a part of, and how they're going to be able to graduate and go out. They're ready and prepared to go to work.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. Mr. Smith?
I just want to thank you for having me again, and I'm very proud to say that my wife works for Gordon County Schools, and that our kids attend there as well. And I went to Redbud Elementary School, Snorville Middle School, Gordon Central High School, so it was red side, blue side. It's all the same to me. I'm just passionate about Gordon County. I'm passionate about our schools, and I would love to provide my service and go to work for our county, go to work for our school system, and try to elevate it to another level and take it to a new direction. And thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Barnett and Mr. Smith, candidates for Post 5 in the Gordon County Board of Education. We'll move now to our last race for tonight. It's Gordon County Board of Education Post 7, and it is an at-large seat. The candidates are Mr. Eddie T. Hall and Mr. Larry Massey. By virtue of the coin toss, Mr. Hall will go first with his opening statement, and when he concludes, if you'll begin yours, Mr. Massey.
Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Chamber for having us here like some of the others have, but also it excites me to be in an atmosphere like this because this is democracy at work, and it's, as a history student, I can tell you this is what it's about. I'd like to also say there's some very fine people that represent us personally. We're probably way apart philosophically than we might care to admit, but I respect the fact that they've stepped up and served, and I appreciate it, and no matter what's said in a campaign, you have my utmost respect. With that, I'm Eddie Hall. I'm seeking to represent the people here in Gordon County on the Board of Education in Post 7. I'm a lifelong resident of Gordon County. I'm from a family of farmers, textile workers. I've lived here, raised my kids here, and I don't want to live anywhere else. This is my home. Today, I work as a consumer and commercial sales associate for Prater Ford. Prior to that, I've had a screen print sportswear company. I have held management positions in sales and marketing, customer service, various other things. I've got a pretty wide-ranging resume. I've served on the city zoning board. I've been elected twice to the city board of education. I've sat on numerous committees for both the city and county, and even once served on the committee for the grand jury. I realize the importance of our schools to the continued growth of our community. It's probably one of the most overlooked but yet most important things in our community. Our schools are often one of the very first things a company looks at when they come here to expand. They have to know that they're going to get a good workforce and that their employees that they bring in here are going to have a good place to send their kids to school, or they'll go somewhere else. They also look at the millage rate. And as been pointed out here, we have a very high millage rate. We can do better.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Massey.
Thank you to the Chamber for having me this evening. Thank you all for coming and participating. Good evening. I'm Larry Massey. I'm the current Post 7 board member. I've been the Post 7 member just since last September. During my short time here, I've been able to identify several areas needing improvement, and my promise is that I will always approach all situations and decisions with three main priorities in mind. Number one, I advocate for all students. Number two is career growth for every teacher and staff member. And number three, the most efficient use of our tax dollars. Let me expand on these. Priority number one is number one for a reason. I fight for all students. Every student should have the opportunity for the best education possible, whether that's AP or dual enrollment for college-bound students, or CTAE classes for those interested in a technical education, or just a quality, well-rounded education. Priority number two, every teacher and staff member should have every opportunity and grow and advance in their careers. You've read the papers lately? It's very important that every position be posted and the hiring process is consistent and transparent. Why? To develop a culture where our school employees feel valued and are happy and have opportunities to grow. Listen, we have some of the most talented educators and staff in North Georgia. Let's keep and grow this talent. And let me remind you, our test scores are some of the top in the nation, in the region. Finally, my third priority is ensuring the most efficient use of our tax dollars. We are all taxpayers here. Every dollar should be maximized for the betterment of our students and our schools. I currently attend the Chamber's Economic Development Committee to see and influence future businesses and its tax base for Gordon County for the benefit of our schools. I began my path to the Board of Education as a parent. I continued as a local governance team member at Redbud Elementary. I believe these teams are very important. I have visited with most of these teams to discuss their responsibilities and to gain their input. Thank you.
Mr. Massey, we'll begin with you with this first question. Could you please tell us what your highest level of educational achievement is, and then do you believe that there should be a minimum level of educational achievement required to qualify for a position on the Board of Education?
Thank you. My highest level of education, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Business Management from Kennesaw State University. And then I actually say a little bit higher. Since I was a jet pilot in the Marine Corps, that's about 2 years it took to get those wings, and I kind of look at that as a master's in aviation. But as far as sitting on the Board of Education, I don't believe there's any minimum educational requirement. I just think that somebody needs to be able to put the time in to get educated on the needs and the responsibilities of a board member, and their willingness to serve and to advocate for all children. And to remember the one thing you have to remember is that it's all for the kids.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Mr. Hall?
Well, I don't have a college degree. I have attended college for a little over 3 years. I was pursuing a degree in history and business. I had aspired to become an attorney at one point in time. But this was 1982. Our country was in a kind of a tough job market. Housing interest was to buy a house that you paid an 18% interest rate. I had a job present itself, and I decided to take it, and I didn't finish my degree. I don't think that ever held me back. I achieved some very good positions, made some very good money. As I've talked to my children about pursuing their education, I have outlined my lack of the degree and as an effort to encourage them to do more. I have a daughter who is received her BSN in nursing. I have a son who's a teacher. And then I've got another son that climbs cell phone towers, and I've got another son that's in his second year at Georgia Tech, and he'll start this fall as a junior, so he's a little ahead of the curve. And then I've got a little one at W.L. Swain. All of that being said, I don't think a degree would be a requirement to be on the Board of Education. I think the Board of Education is the most basic function of a democracy. I think it's about the people, and that's I think anybody should be able to serve on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. We have established through both sets of questions already that there is some disparity in the tax digest between the two systems and the numbers of students. And we've also talked about the Freeport exemption and the county commission and the city of Calhoun's aspirations to move that to 100%. All of those are efforts to seek out and attract new businesses to Gordon County. What is your vision, Mr. Hall? We would start with you, but what is your vision for the balance between economic development and incentives and funding our schools?
Well, and that is a very tough question, and as everyone else has pointed out. But I can tell you from being on the business side, the Freeport was killing us. I worked for companies that come into Gordon County, and they would pass us by because of our Freeport situation. That that takes away jobs, it takes away housing, it takes away a lot of things. You also have to find an area of reason when you set a millage rate, and as I pointed out, ours is a high one. I think you have to just tighten your belt, do what's needed, and realize you can't do everything. And I think that's why we have to be so careful about the way we spend our tax dollars. Those are precious dollars. And when you don't watch where every single one of them goes, that $2,000 becomes 10, that 10 becomes 50, and that 50 becomes 100, and then, it goes on down the road. I think it forces us to be better managers of our resources more than anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Massey?
Thank you. Like everybody pretty much here has said, it's a delicate balance between the jobs you're going to gain and the tax dollars that you're going to lose. But you came back to you gave the split of the county versus the side, the 2/3 of students versus we're only getting 54% of the tax dollars. I'm sorry, 54% of the tax dollars. And I believe that is a result of this, that the city picks and annexes the businesses that they want to gain those tax dollars. How you fix that, I don't know. I've gone to several economic development committee meetings. I'm not a participating member. I just listen. But I know that I believe that the city picking those properties is why the disparity is there. There's also a few other disparity issues. I know that I've spoken with the superintendent about the pre-K SPLOST split. And right now it's split 50-50 between the, excuse me.
You can wait and we can pause your time too.
It's split 50-50 between the county and the city. Given that we have 60% of the students, it should be a different split. Now that's not a whole lot of money, but it probably comes down to maybe $25,000 to $30,000 a month, which adds up. Our nursing right now, we get $75,000 a year from the commissioners, and right now that's also split 50-50, and I don't see that as being an equitable split. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Since both of you actually have experience on school boards, I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. First, what do you see as the appropriate role of a member of the Board of Education in the day-to-day operations of the schools? And then also, what do you see as the appropriate process by which a concern about a potential violation of a board policy by an administrator or someone in the central office, what do you think the appropriate process should be for dealing with that by the Board of Education?
Thank you. The role of the Board of Education in the day-to-day operations is, I would say, in my opinion, or in law, is nil. The Board of Education is responsible for hiring the superintendent. The superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day operations. Now, I get phone calls and people call and they have questions for me, and I always direct those through the chain of command through the superintendent, and the superintendent will proceed down to get an answer for that question. I look at my role on the board as a liaison between the school system and the public, but as far as in the day-to-day operations, I have very little. In regards to a problem with a policy, as Ms. Barnett said, we have a chairman. We would come together as a board. We would gather all the evidence. We would discuss it. We would bring in the attorney. We would look at it and come up with a proper resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Mr. Hall?
Well, I would agree that on an everyday basis, a board member has no role. It is the role of the superintendent to run the schools. But as far as the public goes, they know they elect you, and especially in a community like ours, they see you as their conduit, and that is a function of a board member, I feel. You can't give them an answer. You can't solve their problem necessarily, but you can send them in the right direction and sometimes it's not necessarily the superintendent. It may be you need to talk to the principal. But I think the bottom line is people want to be heard, and they want to know that their concern is addressed and listened to. And I feel like I've always done a good job with that, whether it be from a student, a parent, or even a teacher. Because at times teachers feel like that they have nowhere to turn, and they don't expect you to fix anything for them, but they want to let you tell them where they need to go. They feel like they're at the end of the road. As far as the policy violations, I can't imagine why there would be policy violations, and if they were, I think that would be an issue that the board as a whole would handle that and review what the situation was, and if it warranted it, termination. I mean, policies for Board of Education are the same thing as laws in the regular world, and they have to be followed. And then when you start violating the policies that you've set as a board, what message do you send to the children who you're expecting to follow the rules? You have to follow the rules no matter what, so that you set the right example.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Last question for you two. Again, it has been asked before, but throughout the state, there are questions and concerns about the lessening of professional standards in hiring as it relates to faculty and charter systems in particular. Gordon County is a charter system. Some school systems have taken the step to specifically, their Board of Education has specifically made a pledge not to lower professional standards. What is your position on this issue, and do you see that there are challenges in hiring educators to work in our Gordon County school system?
Me first.
You first.
I think the challenges are different depending on what part of the state you're in. I don't think Gordon County faces the same challenges they may in Unadilla, Georgia, or somewhere that's out in a rural section of the state. If you're familiar with the situations in those areas, they have a hard time getting anybody to work. So yes, they do have to make some sacrifices. Here in Gordon County, with the programs we have around us producing teachers, I have never found it to be a problem to hire a teacher, and I would not want to lower our standards. I think we should have higher standards. I'm not a big proponent of the TAP program. That's where people come in who don't have a teaching degree. Now, sometimes you have to do it if there's a void, but it's very seldom we have that void anymore with the amount of teachers that are being produced. There may be an occasion when you can't fill a math slot or a specific slot. I think if you do that, the superintendent comes to the board, says, listen, we can't hire this position and then get it filled. We're going to have to hire somebody that's maybe their qualifications are off. I think the board does that and takes responsibility for it. They don't put it, they don't let that fall on the superintendent or the HR director. The board is the boss. The superintendent works for the board. That's the only person in the whole system that the board can hire or fire, and that's the way I look at that. I don't think we should lower our standards in this part of the state. I think we have too many people we can hire.
Thank you, Mr. Massey.
I agree with Mr. Hall. We do not need to lower our standards in this part of the state. The other parts of the state, like he said, may have challenges hiring entry-level teachers. We don't have. I don't believe we have that challenge here. We should not lower our standards. Maybe on a case-by-case basis where the superintendent comes to us. As far as for assistant principals and leadership positions, I don't see any reason why standards should be lowered. And when you look at them, what our standards have always been, they've always been a requirement of a master's degree. And then with this latest hire, I know this is all directed to me, with this latest hire, because at Snorville High School, it was lowered to a bachelor's degree. And that may have been the best candidate for that second position, but it wasn't brought to the board. I would have, if the superintendent had come to me and explained to me that this is the best person, this is what the principal believes it should be, then I might have been willing to make an exception. But I do not believe we should lower our standards in this county.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Mr. Hall, will you please open with your closing statement, and then Mr. Massey, you will have the last word.
Sure. In closing, I just like to say the voters have a choice. As I said earlier, I think everybody on the board are great people, but I think we have some philosophical differences on the way we see a school system should be run. The voters can continue the status quo, or they can vote for change. They can keep a BOE that continues the same behavior, or they can vote for change. I would be that change, and I just ask that when the voters go to the polls, they vote for Eddie Hall. Thank you.
I thank you again. I thank the chamber. I thank all of y'all for coming and sitting through this. It's a very important part of our democracy. We have great schools here in Gordon County. We have some of the best test scores in North Georgia. We have some of the best test scores in the region. We have a fantastic central office. We have a fantastic staff. Our leadership positions, our teachers' positions, all wonderful. Folks, I'm all in. And with your vote and support and getting others to vote, I'll continue to provide transparency and make Gordon County schools continue to shine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey, and let's thank all of our candidates for the Board of Education.
Thanks, Paul Worley, and your committee for putting this together. One thing to set up, folks, is set up the room, which is the city employees, and that's very interesting because it was not a city convention. Thank you very much. Thank Shay Hicks, Grant Walraven, for giving us sample ballots and all the other good things. The chamber staff, I can't say enough about them. There's Jim Yalman back there, and there's one person here especially I want you to say as you leave. Tomorrow is Joni Harvin's birthday.